Spirit 92.9 welcomes you to The Lunch Break with your friends Josh, Jess, and Rachel. Join us as we chat about life, food, faith, and everything in between.
Hello, and welcome to the Lunch Break podcast. I'm Rachel, and I'm joined by Jess and Josh. And
Hello.
This is season 2, episode 4. Today, we are talking about fear.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because, all of us struggle with fear at one point or multiple points in our lives.
Every day.
Yes, every day is real. So we're going to talk about that today. And before we get to that, though, we wanted to share what is in our lunch boxes because we found out that we have the best conversations around the lunch table. So we all bring a lunch and tell you about it. So who wants to go first?
Where our best conversations are born, right?
I'll go first.
Go ahead, Josh.
So I brought a Minnesota classic, which I think Jess has brought to the podcast before too, but tater tot hot dish. I mean, you can't go wrong. We're recording this in mid-October and it's getting cooler outside now, and it's just the perfect time for comfort food. So I made my first tater tot hot dish in quite a while. And I changed it up just a little bit.
You spiced yours up a little bit.
Yeah,
Wait,
literally.
you were telling me that.
So when I was getting the ingredients in the store, I normally add cream of mushroom, cream of chicken soup. I saw that there was cream of bacon soup, which I didn't even know was a thing. And so I added some of that along with the cream of mushroom and cream of chicken. And then I also added a little bit of red pepper. And it's a game changer. It was so good. I think it might be the best tater tot hot dish I have ever had. So
Cream of bacon.
kind of proud of myself and loving eating it.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, you're allowed any kind of cream of whatever soup, and it's still Minnesotan, right? I mean, put a cream of whatever you can find. The red pepper flakes, though, I don't know. Can you make something spicy, and can it still be a very Minnesotan dish?
I don't know if
think
it's
it
very.
can.
I don't know if it's very Minnesotan because our spice tolerance here is notoriously
Not
low.
good.
But I'm not originally from Minnesota, so
See, there you go.
Well,
I
I don't
want a
know
little
that
spice.
Wisconsin is super spicy either.
Fair point.
Oh, goodness.
Well, good. Can't go wrong with tater tot hot dish.
Yeah. And since it is chilly outside right now, it's soup season. So I made lasagna soup, which is my first time ever making it.
Nice.
So it's basically like lasagna, but in soup form, and you top it with ricotta cheese.
Oh, yum.
Yeah, it's really good. So
I've never tried that. I've seen it. I love lasagna. I also went with soup today because it is the season. And so in my crock pot is vegetable beef soup with barley, which was one that my grandma always made. And so not only is it comfort food, but it just brings back all the nostalgia of grandma's house, some warm toasty bread and some vegetable beef soup.
Oh man, my grandma always made vegetable beef stew. When we go to her house for Christmas, that must be a grandma thing.
I don't know. Well,
It's so
I'm a
good.
grandma, so now I can make it, and I do.
It's so good.
So good.
And you can find the recipes of everything that we just mentioned on our website in the recipe box at spirit929.com. Okay, so it is time to talk about our topic for today, which is fear. And I'm a little anxious about talking about fear because it's something that, all of us struggle with at some point in our life, whether it's you're dealing with anxiety or a literal actual fear of something. So who wants to kick us off with fear?
Well, we were talking about there's kind of two kinds of fear, right? There's physical fears, and then there's kind of those mental, spiritual, emotional fears.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we talk about those deeper fears, I'm curious what kind of physical fears, what is something you guys are afraid of? I talk a lot about my fear of spiders. It's ridiculous. I mean, I am an arachnophobiac. Spiders, me, not good together. Very afraid.
Okay.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah. I can be a little bit of a germaphobe at times.
Really? I didn't know that about you.
But it's not all germs. It's but some things I'm just I gotta wash my hands. And there might be some deeper things connected to that too. But yeah, there'll be certain things. I think I still whenever I get home from being in public, and this is a good habit, but I typically wash my hands when I get home from being out in public. Like, my hands will feel dirty until I wash them. So there's probably a little bit of OCD stuff in there as well.
Mild.
But yeah, so to some extent, I can be a germaphobe about certain things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I second the spiders thing. I hate spiders. I do not like them at all. I also don't like snakes. They freak me out. Especially the big ones. So that's a big no-no for me. But I actually have, it's a weird fear.
Okay.
And it's an actual phobia. So it's called automatophobia. And it is the fear of things that look like they are human, but they are not.
Like mannequins.
Wow. Never
Yes.
heard of that.
So-
okay.
Wow.
Okay, so I have to explain. I have gotten a lot better with this, but the whole thing kind of started, and I, all respect to my grandma, but my grandma makes ceramic dolls. And
no.
I have to explain. So I would, go over to her house when I was younger, and she had asked me to go and get something out of her craft room. And this is so morbid, but in the drawers, she had these like clear plastic drawers, and she had all of the doll parts. So she had like the legs and the eyeballs and the feet and like all of this. And so I saw that at a very young age, and it freaked me out. And so ever since then, like ceramic dolls, like those mannequins that are really realistic.
Yeah.
And then when you go to an amusement park and there's animatronics that are really realistic, not for me. I remember when Disney World had the Great Movie Ride, and they had like all of the different movies that they had animatronics with, and I will never forget this, the Wizard of Oz part where you go in and there's all of these what are they called? The little
Munchkins.
All of the munchkins like pop out at you. And I was
Yeah, that's
sobbing.
scary.
I was sobbing, crying. And I was like, it's a visceral fear for me. And I've gotten a lot better now, but it's still, especially ceramic dolls. Oh, I can't. They
Does
freak me
Grandma
out.
know that she did this to you?
I haven't told her because I
okay.
would feel horrible. I would
She
feel
doesn't listen to
absolutely
the
horrible.
podcast.
But yeah, so there's my fear.
Well, you know what? We all have our thing. And like we might, you guys might be like, Jess, spiders, that's ridiculous. They're like little tiny things. Yeah, little tiny things with lots of legs. Hello.
Too many legs.
And you might think Josh's fear is kind of, whatever, but we all have our own thing, right? And
Yeah.
our fears to us are very real, whether they are physical fears or, those other fears that we were talking about. So let's talk about those, the things that are kind of more internal fears, right? Who wants to start with that one?
Well,
I have a fear of starting conversations. No, I don't.
I think that all of us can relate to having anxiety in a very broad sense. For me, I really struggle with fear about the future. That's something that I worry about and have anxiety about a lot. And I can worry about, we kind of talked about this when we talked about regrets in the past episode of, did I make a wrong decision here? Did I make a wrong turn? Should I have done this instead? Or what could I be doing right now to, make the future better for future me? And I worry about that a lot. And I have had to learn that I'm not in control. There's no way that I can control that myself. God is in control, and his plan for me is far better than anything that I could ever imagine for myself. And that is hard. When you really worry about the future, it can be really hard to trust in God and trust in his plan. But it's a daily reminder I have to remind myself every day. He has a plan for me, and I might not understand it or see it yet, but good things are coming.
Yeah, something we all have to remind ourselves every day, because that fear, I know for me, like fear and anxiety can just grip me and paralyze me a lot of the time, which, you were talking about, did I make the wrong decision? Did I take a wrong turn? Sometimes I don't even get that far because I'm so paralyzed by the what if fear that I feel like it probably has caused me not to just miss out on making important decisions, but to miss out on opportunities that God has had for me because I let fear hold me back. And, we know as believers and Jesus followers that we're supposed to give him that fear and we're supposed to walk in peace, but actually living that out, that could be a whole different thing.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it really is. I definitely struggle with fear, and I think a lot of I am afraid of what people think of me, and I think a lot of my fears kind of boil down to being afraid of rejection and being ostracized as I kind of think about it. And yeah, it's tough. And that kind of, like you were saying, Jess, has prevented me at times from doing things that I could have or maybe even should have. And yeah, it's one of those things probably where the more we are talking about it and speaking it and just getting it out into the light, like the less power it has over us.
Mm-hmm. That's true. The more that we, I think it's like you spot your anxiety and you say, no, what you're telling me right now is a lie. It's not the truth. And it takes work to be able to spot that and acknowledge it and not just brush it under the rug. I feel like for a lot of my life, I've done that where I will be anxious about something and I'm like, we can worry about that later. We're not going to talk about that right now. But suppressing it is not helping. It's actually making it worse. And so to be able to acknowledge that fear and then bring it to God and say, okay, this is what I'm anxious about right now. I'm just going to place it at your feet because I can't handle it. He can take care of it like that, and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I think that is the key, is acknowledging it, confronting it, naming it, and then giving it to God. And there are sometimes I wrote this down as you were talking before, Rachel, because I don't know how many times I've said this prayer: Lord, calm my anxious heart. I trust you. And, sometimes you just got to keep telling yourself that over and over again, and you got to keep handing it to God because the fear keeps coming back. And whose voice are you listening to? Oftentimes we're listening to the voice of the enemy who's trying to convince us that everything's going to go wrong. Nobody likes us. We can't do this. We're not good enough for this or whatever. And he just builds up that fear like building blocks inside our soul. And then all of a sudden we're making all of our decisions based on that fear that he's created inside of us. And so, but it's one of those things, if you're constantly taking those blocks off and saying, no, I'm giving this to God, Lord, I'm giving this to you. Oh, nope, don't want it back. Going to set it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a constant thing where we have to be doing that, pushing back against the enemy and giving that fear back to God and saying, this is not mine to carry.
Yeah. I think we have to challenge the anxiety. And I've been going and seeing a therapist for the past, I don't know, year and a half, something like that. And we talked a lot about anxiety, and it's just interesting, like how anxiety will take a shred of evidence and turn that little shred of evidence into a mountain. So here's sort of a little more humorous example that maybe you can relate to, but I've had times in my life where I have convinced myself that I am dying because I'll be like, oh, what is this weird thing on my skin? Oh, let's look it up. Oh, look at all these symptoms. Oh my goodness, I have cancer. I might have 6 months to live, and suddenly it's as it, like this very small amount of evidence, maybe a spot on my skin or something. And suddenly I've convinced myself that I might only have 6 months to live. But that's how anxiety works. It takes a tiny shred of evidence and turns it into something massive and tells us lies. Like there's so many lies that I have believed about myself and internalized. And that's why it's so important to challenge it and to challenge the anxiety in light of the truth. Okay, like what does God say right now? Like, first of all, it's very unlikely, take that example again. It's very unlikely that this little spot means I have cancer. But even if it did, God has promised he's going to take care of me. He's promised me he has a plan. He's promised me that even beyond this life, he has something better for me. Can I trust him? Can I trust that? And so, like constantly examining that anxiety in light of the truth and reminding ourselves what the truth is. And it was kind of cool because even as I left my counseling appointment, it was yesterday actually that I had it. This song by Megan Woods called "The Truth" was on Spirit 92.9, the radio station we all work for, and that song speaks to that like first of all, how many times do we have to hear a lie before we start to believe it? But then, like, the truth is, I'm truly loved. The truth is, I don't belong to the lies. I belong to Jesus. So I think just challenging that is so important.
It's true. And then while we were talking, I also was thinking about the world and the enemy profit off of our fear. Like, if we are constantly living in fear or anxiety, like, just thinking of like external examples of like the fear of getting older or the fear of life change, or just there are so many different fears. The enemy sees that and he sees an open door. And so he is going to run through that door and tell us the lies and continue to tell us the lies over and over and over again until we start to believe it. And so one of the things in those moments where I have had those very real fears, like one of the ones that I struggle with a lot is the fear of being alone. And so I have had to say, I am never alone. The truth is that I am never alone. And I have to remember, what am I putting my trust in? Am I putting my trust in the things of this world, which are always going to fail and are always going to not be good? Or am I putting my trust in God, who always has good things for me and who never leaves me alone? And that could be the fear of anything that's going on in our life. The fear for, our society or our country, our world, whatever it is. Where are you putting your trust? If you put your trust in God, good things are going to happen. He's the only place that we can put our trust in.
Yeah, and I think there's room for healthy fear as well, to a certain extent, right? I think about when my older kids were younger, my husband at the time, we would go visit this park that had a waterfall. And you could step over the rail and go walk out and stand at the top of the waterfall. And my husband and my sons would do that every time. And I would literally sit down on the ground and just be like, literally paralyzed by fear that they were going to fall off the waterfall and be swept away into the river, right? There was this big thing. Okay, I still believe that was a healthy fear, right? That never happened, and I had to pray a lot and trust God. But should they have done that? No, absolutely not. Like, use your common sense. There's times when God gives us a gift of fear because it's His protection, right? And so things like that are dangerous, He's going to put a fear in us because He wants us to use our common sense. But then there's sometimes when, especially as parents, we can let fear rule us when it comes to our kids and raising them and their safety and different things. And that is definitely a mistake that I think I made with my older kids, is that I kind of helicopter parented out of fear. I was always afraid of something terrible happening to them. And so I probably made them miss out on some experiences, right? Because mom was afraid of that. And so I'm trying to be a little less that way with the fourth one that God has given me, who's 7 now. But of course, she's the one who's the most daring. It's as if she knows. But, it's like we have to balance that out. Like, God, is this feeling that you're putting inside of me for my protection? Or is it me reacting out of a what if? And if so, then I need the courage from you to be able to confront this, And so we talk about fear like it's such a bad thing sometimes, but I also want us to recognize that sometimes God will give it to us as a gift to protect us.
That's true. It's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, should we do questions from the lunchbox?
Yeah. Okay. So this is what we do every podcast episode. I have a boombox lunchbox, which you can see if you're watching the podcast on YouTube. It's really cool. It actually looks like a boombox. And so each episode we draw out some questions on our topic. So question number 1. It is a little scary.
Not knowing what's
Question
coming.
number 1. Do you believe in the concept of do it afraid? Why or why not?
I would say yes, I do believe in that because the reason I'm here is because I did it afraid. But yeah, there have been a lot of life change moments in my life where I have been terrified.
Yeah.
I have been so scared, and it's a scared of, I just don't know what's coming. But I do know that what is coming is something that's going to be good, because it's a calling and it's something that God has called me to. And so for this experience, specifically moving here to Minnesota, I had already moved across the country once. And so my fear was, I'm going to be moving to another place again. Am I going to find community? Am I going to feel like I belong? Like all of those very real emotions when you're moving to a new place and literally no one. But if I didn't do it afraid, I wouldn't be here. And that's like a very sobering thought of I think about this a lot of, man, that took a lot of courage, Past Rachel. Like, that's kind of crazy. And there have been times where I haven't done something because I have been so afraid. And always when I have done that and I have let fear take me over, not so great things have happened. But when I decide to say, no, I'm going to push back on fear, I'm going to push back on my anxiety, and I'm going to trust in what God is telling me to do, good things come from it.
I love that. Yeah, sometimes you got to step out in spite of it and then just trust God through it, because it's not just going to all disappear before you do the next right thing that he has for you.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with the concept of do it afraid. And there's a quote from author and speaker John Acuff, and he says, you don't think your way out of overthinking, you act your way out of overthinking. And it's similar with fear sometimes. You don't think your way out of fear, you act your way out of fear. And if we never did anything afraid, we would never get anything done, because goodness grief, I'm afraid of a lot of things. Every time we have a concert or somewhere where I need to go speak up front in front of people,
so real.
I get so scared. Like, okay, I just can't wait for this to be over. But I do it. I do it afraid. And there's a lot of areas like that where I'll at least have a little bit of anxiousness going into it, but I just do it. And otherwise it'll paralyze you. So you got to do it afraid.
Yeah.
Okay, ready for question number 2? Drum roll. Question number 2 from the lunchbox. What are some practical ways to remind ourselves of truth even in the midst of fear?
Listen to Spirit 92.9.
Yes!
Shameless plug.
But totally, I mean, think about all the songs on Spirit 92.9.
Fear is a Liar
Yeah.
is the one that's on my mind right now. The Truth that you were talking about by Megan Woods. There's so many songs that speak to that, like reminding us that our fear is not the voice of God, right?
Yeah.
And what the voice of God truly is. So listen to music and read things and read scriptures and talk to people who remind you that fear, I mean, it might exist, but it doesn't have to rule you or control you, right?
Yeah, that song, another one, "Fear Is Not My Future" by Maverick City Music.
Oh man,
That's a song. That's a song that I resonated a lot with last year, and it's so important. Yeah, like the things we're listening to and we're inputting into our brain, they matter. They matter, and they can move us towards fear or away from fear. So yeah, I mean, shameless plug, but
I don't mind.
Listen to Spirit 92.9. This is a Spirit 92.9 podcast.
I mean, honestly, if I'm in the car and I'm feeling fear about something and I turn the radio on, God uses Christian music to help calm that fear, right? And we can pray through it and worship through it. Like that song says,
There's a song for everything.
Yes.
I was also thinking of Voice of Truth. The Voice of Truth
Ooh.
tells me a
Oldie but a
different
goodie.
Taking it
story.
old school.
Yeah.
Throwback.
But yeah, it's true. Music is a big thing for me to remind me of the truth. I have started to do this more, where when I am having those anxious moments or when I feel like I'm being taken over by fear, I just stop and I just pray.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Lord, I'm feeling this right now, and I need you to intervene, and I need you to calm my anxious heart, just like you were talking about. You're the calm my anxious heart.
That's a song too. Wow.
There's a song for everything. But prayer, it is a one-on-one conversation with God wherever you are at that point. And when you are in that anxious headspace, to just take a moment to quiet your mind and to quiet those lies that keep running around in your head, and to just like speak it all out to God, whatever you're anxious about, whatever you're worried about. He's listening and he's going to take care of it. And I have gotten a lot better of, when I am in that moment, stop, pray.
Stop, drop, and pray.
Maybe not drop.
Keep your hands on the steering wheel. We do not recommend taking them off. Yeah, but I agree with all that. And I guess another practical thing, seeing a therapist, seeing a counselor, like I think that's a good thing. Or sometimes even just talking to a friend, again, just to name those things. And if you have a good friend, a lot of times they can challenge you and challenge that fear a little bit. Like, okay, let's examine, not in a judgmental way, but let's examine that. Let's talk about that. Is that actually true about you, or is this something that is irrational and not from God?
Yeah, I have friends like that, but then, oh my gosh, my parents will be the ones to be like, who's telling you that lie? And they'll be the ones that will call it out. And I'll be like, well, I'm telling myself that lie and the devil telling me that lie. But it's true. When you have good people in your life that truly care and love you, and they are the ones to be able to call you out. You need people in your life like that, or else you're just going to be an anxiety ball.
Yeah.
Next question.
All right, next question. How do you acknowledge your fears without letting them hold you back or control you?
I think that goes back to what Rachel was talking about praying them and speaking that out loud. Like, Lord, this is what I'm feeling. This is my fear right now. And then I'm giving this to God. I'm giving it to you, to deal with, because it's it's real, right? Even though it's lying to you, it's a real feeling. And sometimes just speaking it out loud, or like you, Josh, said, speak it to a friend or a therapist or somebody where you can just acknowledge it and say it out loud. I feel like fear is easier to tackle once it's kind of out there, right? It's out of your soul, out of your heart.
Once it's exposed.
Out in the open. Yeah, and exposed, right, to the light of truth. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think fear thrives in the darkness when it's just you and the fear, right? When you start exposing it to the truth, like opening up that door, here's the light, that's when it exposes it for what it is, and that's a liar.
Yeah, it's true. I think also when I'm in those anxious moments, like obviously praying in that anxious moment, but also stopping whatever you're doing. I have learned that when you are in the middle, maybe it's like you're overwhelmed with work and that's why you're super anxious. I have to stop. I stop and I go walk and do something else. Or I take my mind off of what I'm currently doing and go and do something else, something that is comforting for me, something that's going to bring me out of that negative headspace. Like, there is such a power in leaving that one environment where you're overwhelmed and stressed and anxious and going to something different that is going to make you more comfortable. It's crazy. I've gone through it before, and just walking into a different room makes an entire huge difference.
That's so true. I think a lot of times when it hits me is when I'm laying in bed in the dark, in the quiet at night, and all of a sudden it's like, woof, well, what if this happens, and what if this falls apart, and what if I lose everything? I mean, it's like all of a sudden, where did this all come from? And so sometimes I have to get up, get out of bed, go downstairs, just change my environment, turn on the light, and be like, okay, I don't know what that was all about, but in reality and in the light, with the lights on, it's like, okay, everything's not so scary, literally. And so sometimes just changing your environment and what you see around you, that makes a big difference, especially at night. I don't know if that's just me.
No, I totally get that. There is when your mind kind of just wanders before you fall asleep, and it's just what if this, what if that, la 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 la, and it's just that quiet time in the dark where you're like, I can't fall asleep because I'm overthinking and all of this. But yeah, that's super real. But then I've had that before too, where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go walk into the kitchen and we're just going to drink a glass of water and we're just going to breathe for a little bit. And then, change of environment.
Yep.
One more question.
Last question. What is a time you faced a fear head on, whether that was willingly or unwillingly?
Silence.
Any practical examples?
Oh, man. Oh, goodness.
You've already shared yours, Rachel.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like 47 and she's gotten up and moved across the country twice. And I'm like, I don't know if I can.
Now, do I
that.
recommend that for everyone? No.
Yeah.
I think I'll start on this one. I think one for me is / was opening up to people, because I think that was such a big fear of mine for a long time. Like when I was a teenager, I'm struggling with all these things internally, and I'm like, wow, if I open up, again, there's that fear of rejection, that fear of ostracism, and there's stuff inside me that I needed to talk about, and I was so afraid to talk about it. And so it is a big point in my life where I was on a little road trip with my dad, and he knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. And so he was basically like, Josh, you got to talk about this. And so we had a conversation there, and instead of the ostracism and rejection that I was expecting, I was met with grace and love. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. And I think I still struggle to open up, but I think it's been getting better. And even as I've been talking about some things in therapy, I think I'm getting better at being open and exposing things to the light. And again, still a work in progress, but that was a time that I faced a fear head on, kind of unwillingly, but
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of times we don't have a choice. Like sometimes you have a choice. Yes, I'm going to take a job and move across the country, right? Sometimes you're forced into facing your fears. And I just think about my fear of being alone and losing everything. And I know I talk about this a lot, but when my husband decided to end our marriage, I didn't have a choice. It's like, okay, I'm going to all of a sudden be on my own, taking care of these kids. How am I going to do this? I was so afraid. But looking in hindsight now, knowing that I didn't have any choice but to face that fear and move forward or give up, right? That was the other option, but I didn't give up. That God came through and he provided and he took care of, that. And so whatever you're fearing, whether it's something like that or, or opening up or whatever, God will bless you in moving forward and facing that fear head on because he knows that you're experiencing growth in your faith walk. So he's going to take care of you. He's going to bless you through that. Maybe you're facing something fearful like a diagnosis or something else like that. That's a scary thing, but also it's so much less scary when you're walking through it with Jesus because he's not going to leave you in that alone.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing all of us have to remember when we are dealing with that fear that can be so just all-encompassing. We are never alone. And, we say that a lot in Christendom, whatever you want to call it, but it's true. We are truly, truly, truly never alone. And God is always right there. He is always with us in every single moment.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good way to end. A good reminder that you're not alone, whatever fears you're facing today. So with that, we want to thank you so much for just letting us have this conversation and joining into it with us because, fear is a difficult thing to face. And we want to be praying for you and whatever fears you're facing as well. And so thanks so much for listening today. Of course, this podcast is available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and the Spirit 92.9 YouTube channel. You can watch or listen to all of Season 1, and then, of course, what we've done in Season 2 so far. Which episode are we on? 4 now?
This is episode 4.
4. Crazy. So 3 other ones. And make sure... we don't want to ask you to rate it 5 stars, but we kind of do too because it helps more people find it. So thanks for listening today.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.